In this video, we are going to turn to Peter Singer's views on the killing of embryos and fetuses as part of the abortion topic for this unit. In particular, we're going to be looking at a crucial moral concept in Singer's philosophy, the concept of persons or personhood. But before we delve into that topic, it's worth looking back over his views concerning animals. You'll recall that last time we looked at the total view utilitarian approach to the killing of animals, and we saw that some total view utilitarians might argue that merely sentient animals used in factory farming are replaceable, and therefore it might not be wrong to kill them for food. Why not? Well, so long as the overall amount of utility remains undiminished, according to the total view utilitarian, because those animals that are killed are replaced with others, painlessly killing merely sentient animals might be morally acceptable. And this comes about because the total view utilitarian is concerned with the overall amount of happiness for all individuals, past, present, and future. In factory farming, the creation of further animals with some happiness in their lives further down the track offsets or compensates for the loss of happiness that results from those earlier animals' deaths. We saw, however, that the replaceability argument, and in particular the total view utilitarian approach, faced difficulties. And then we saw that the alternative approach, prior existence view, also faced difficulties. And so now we come to Peter Singer's view, which is in fact a kind of Goldilocks solution, pulling together the best aspects of the total view approach and the more intuitively appealing aspects of the prior existence view, which said that in all our moral deliberations we ought to take into account the interests of currently existing individuals rather than merely possible individuals. So let's look at Peter Singer's view, the hybrid view, put forward in his Practical Ethics. Now, on this viewpoint, Singer proposes that in all our moral deliberations, we ought to follow the total view utilitarian approach for the interests of merely sentient individuals. So when deciding what to do, we ought to weigh up the interests of all those individuals sentient individuals, I should say, who will exist past, present, and future. But Singer has a qualification. He says that we should allow special moral weight for the interests of persons who currently exist. Okay. So one of the merits of this approach is that it accounts for our intuitions that some lives are replaceable, those lives of merely sentient beings who have simply momentary interests, while the lives of other individuals, persons, are not merely replaceable, but rather unique and special in some way. So the question is, what exactly are persons? Well, Singer obviously has quite a specific stipulative definition here in mind. It's a special moral category for him. Persons are rational, intelligent, self-conscious beings, capable of conceiving of themselves through time, capable of seeing themselves as distinct entities with a past, present, and future, capable of having this kind of self-awareness and future-oriented projects as a result. Crucial feature of persons is that they have future-oriented preferences. And this, in Singer's viewpoint, makes it generally worse to kill persons rather than non-persons. Now, to grasp why he thinks the killing of persons is generally much worse than killing non-persons, let's consider the following scene from Clint Eastwood's film Unforgiven, in which a young man has just killed somebody.
Jesus Christ. It don't seem real. I ain't gonna never breathe again, ever. How he's dead. And the other one, too. All on account of pulling a trigger.
It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take away all he's got, and all he's ever gonna.
The scene captures the horror of someone realizing what they've done when they've killed a person. Persons have plans, they have needs and desires that are projected into the future. And when you kill a person, you cut off the satisfaction of all those needs and desires and preferences for all time. Now recall that Singer is a preference utilitarian, and preference utilitarians are concerned with bringing about states of affairs in the world rather than states of consciousness. So frustrated preferences matter. They matter a lot, even if you are never consciously aware that your preference is frustrated because you have been killed. So the killing of persons is generally worse than killing non-persons because you cut off a whole host of really important preferences that will never be fulfilled. In Singer's view, this death places a debit in the moral ledger, he says, one that can never be cancelled out, because persons are non-replaceable. Now, straight off, you might think that this hybrid approach enables us to find quite a morally relevant distinction between all or most human beings and most animals. At first glance, it appears to be the case that most human beings do qualify as persons. Certainly, mature adult human beings tend to. And there are some animals, such as oysters, perhaps some fish, perhaps some birds, that appear not to qualify for personhood, who don't have this kind of self-consciousness or any future-oriented preferences to be counted. Crucially, however, Singer thinks that some animals do qualify for personhood. And amongst our list here, we might have members of the higher primates, for example, chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas. Now, on the other side, some human beings are clearly not persons, according to Singer. Some human entities do not reach the heights of being able to conceive of themselves as distinct entities through times. Some human beings are merely replaceable, sentient beings. This leads us to the topic of embryos and fetuses. So let's now turn to the question of whether or not Singer thinks there is any direct wrongness involved in killing embryos and fetuses, human embryos and fetuses. To answer this question, we need to have a few facts at our fingertips. So here are the various stages of early human development. You can see that at fertilization, we have a single cell, a fertilized ova. A few days later, we have a cluster of cells, but still it is not clear that this will be one individual. It's not clear which cell will develop into a human baby. After 14 days, we see individuation. We know whether we have one potential baby or two in the case of twins, and so on. This is the point at which the primitive streak appears, and that goes on to be the backbone. Up to 8 weeks, we have what we call the embryonic stage. After that, the individual is referred to as a fetus. And the fetus, you'll see, develops sentience, that is, the capacity to experience pleasure and pain, or more generally, the capacity to have any interests at all. Sentience comes at the point of 18 weeks. Now, of course, we can't look inside the fetus's head to determine whether the fetus is having any conscious experiences. This physiological evidence is based on certain observations about the development of the cerebral cortex in the child, and it's thought that the cerebral cortex is only mature enough to be able to experience pleasure and pain from 18 weeks on after fertilization. From 22 to 24 weeks, given recent technological advances, a fetus may be viable at this point in gestation, and that means the fetus might be able to live independently of its mother. And then way down the track after birth, which usually occurs sometime around 38 to 40 weeks, from 18 months of age, a human child starts to show signs of self-awareness. And again, we can't look inside a child's mind to know whether or not it is capable of conceiving of itself as a distinct entity through time. But the markers for this, some experiments show, it's usually like something like the mirror test, where the child is aware that it is a distinct entity from everyone else. So here we have some crucial marker events in the development of human beings. Let's now look at Singer's approach to a particular case study, or 3 particular case studies involving an ambitious journalist. You probably know this from the unit reader. So here is Rose. She's an ambitious journalist who would also like to one day be a mother. In this case, Rose is thinking about having a child. She knows she would like to be the kind of mother that was attentive and loving and there for her child. But she's also ambitious for her career. So when the phone call comes, promising her dream job as a foreign correspondent in Jakarta, the decision is obvious for Rose. She will not get pregnant. She will delay her pregnancy. She will go to Jakarta and fulfill her dream to be a foreign correspondent, and she will have her child 1 year later instead. Case number 2. Rose, again, wants to be a mother, knows that she could provide her child with the kind of happiness and satisfaction of an attentive and loving parent. She gets pregnant, but 2 months into the pregnancy, she gets the phone call. It's her dream job, comes straight away, and she decides that she will take up this job, and so she has an abortion, but with the intention of getting pregnant 1 year later, and she does, and she has the child a year later. Case number 3, in this case, Rose has actually gone through with the pregnancy, she's given birth, but she gets the dream phone call immediately after the child's birth. She decides to take the job, and she kills the child painlessly by giving it an injection in its sleep. And no one is any the wiser. She intends to have a child further down the track in the next year, and in fact, in this case, she actually does. So now our question is, here are 3 cases: postponement, abortion, and infanticide. And we're looking, as we know, at the question of the direct wrongness of killing embryos, fetuses, and in this case also newborns. Now, we might ask ourselves then, what would Singer's hybrid approach recommend? And of course, we know that the first step in Singer's hybrid approach is to follow the total view utilitarian approach of weighing up the interests of nearly sentient individuals, past, present, and future. If we're taking into account the interests of persons who currently exist, there's no end of side effects, objections that we might raise in terms of the distress caused to Rosa's family when they discover what she's done in the case of infanticide. There's no end of objections we might raise from society's point of view in terms of the distress and anxiety that the public might feel when they find out that this child has been killed in such a callous fashion. But now I'm going to stipulate, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the side effects in all these cases are minimal or non-existent. Nobody knows what Rose is up to. Nobody knows what she does. And so let's now just focus on the direct wrongness involved, the harm done to the individual killed, the fetus and the newborn in cases 2 and 3. Let's consider what Singer's hybrid approach to these cases would be. Here are your options. Pause the video and decide which of these options best expresses the hybrid approach. Did you pick A? All cases are morally on a par because in each case the loss of one happy life is offset by replacement further down the track. In this case, when we're just looking at the direct wrongness of killing in cases 2 and 3, it does look as though the cases are morally on a par. Why? Why do we say that? Well, because in none of the cases, postponement, abortion, and infanticide, do we reduce the overall amount of satisfaction, past, present, and future. The sentient lives lost are replaced further down the track with other equally satisfied lives. And an important point to make here is that neither the fetus nor the newborn infant in these cases are persons. They do not qualify for personhood, that capacity to conceive of yourself as a distinct entity through time with a past, present, and future. As Singer says, they have no projects, no plans, no preferences that need to be taken into account in our moral deliberations in these cases. As we saw before, the scientific evidence suggests that a fetus develops sentience at 18 weeks gestation, and a newborn, of course, can feel pain and so on. But we have stipulated, I think, in all these cases, that we can always bring about a painless death. And so objections based upon the pain caused are not a factor here. So you can see that taking this hybrid utilitarian approach, for the preference utilitarian, there's no direct wrongness in killing either fetuses or newborns, provided that the deaths are painless, and the wrongness, if anything, must boil down to side effects alone. There's no morally significant dividing line for Singer between fetuses and newborns. And you can see how this view is one that Singer comes to when you consider the fact that in terms of their basic properties, in terms of all their physiological features, there's really no difference between fetuses and newborns other than the fact that one happens to be in the womb on Singer's viewpoint and the other happens to be outside of the mother. For Singer, what is wrong with killing human fetuses and newborn infants? His answer is that the wrongness, if any, may come down to side effects and/or any pain caused if the fetuses and infants in question are supposed to be sentient. We might think that this is not enough to capture our intuitions here about the wrongness of abortion and infanticide, we may want to turn to the viewpoint that fetuses and newborn infants are morally considerable because they are potential persons.